Someone bumps into you. You say sorry. They keep walking. You barely notice the word leaving your mouth. It just happens. Automatic, like blinking. But a few seconds later, your brain catches up. Why did I apologize? You weren't the one who bumped into them. They walked straight into you. Yet somehow the apology came from your mouth, not theirs. If you start paying attention, you'll notice how often this happens. You apologize when someone interrupts you. You apologize when someone misunderstands you. You apologize when someone else makes a mistake. You apologize when you ask a question. You apologize when you need help. You even apologize when you take up space in a conversation. And sometimes the habit is so automatic that you catch yourself apologizing to objects. You bump into a chair and quietly say, "Sorry." Most people laugh about it. They say they're just too polite. But if you slow down and really look at the pattern, something deeper begins to appear. Because this isn't just politeness, it's a reflex, and reflexes exist for a reason. Your brain doesn't create automatic behaviors randomly. Every habit started as a solution to a problem your nervous system once believed was dangerous. Which raises a strange question. Why does your brain treat tension between people like a threat? Why does a moment of disagreement trigger the urge to shrink? Why does the word sorry feel like the fastest way to make everything safe again? To understand that, you have to look at how your brain detects danger. Deep inside your mind is a structure called the amygdala. It's responsible for scanning the environment for threats. For most of human history, threats didn't just mean predators or physical danger. They also meant social conflict. If you lived in a small group thousands of years ago, being rejected by that group could be life-threatening. Your survival depended on belonging. So your brain evolved to detect even small signs of tension between people. A raised voice, a harsh look, a shift in tone, and the moment your nervous system senses that tension, it tries to resolve it. Most people know the 3 classic stress responses: fight, flight, freeze. But there is a 4th response that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. It's called the Fawn response. Instead of confronting the threat or escaping it, the nervous system tries to appease it, smooth it over, make the tension disappear before it escalates. And the fastest tool your brain has for doing that is a single word: sorry. When you apologize, something important happens. The other person usually relaxes. The tension dissolves. The situation stabilizes. Your nervous system feels relief. That relief releases a small dopamine signal in the brain. Dopamine isn't just about pleasure. It's about learning. When the brain finds something that quickly reduces discomfort, it remembers it. Apologizing worked. The threat disappeared. So the brain reinforces the behavior. The next time tension appears, the word comes faster. Over time, the pattern becomes automatic. Your apology becomes what psychologists sometimes call a preemptive shield. You're not apologizing because you did something wrong. You're apologizing to prevent the possibility that someone might become upset. And once you see that pattern, something else becomes obvious. Most of the time, the conflict you're trying to prevent never actually existed. Your brain predicted it, and predictions feel real. This is why people who struggle with over-apologizing often describe the same experience. You replay conversations in your head. You analyze the tone of a message. You wonder if someone misunderstood what you meant. And before they even respond, you're already apologizing. You're not reacting to conflict. You're reacting to the fear of conflict. And that fear usually didn't begin in adulthood. It began much earlier. Think back to childhood environments where emotional tension carried consequences. Maybe arguments in your house escalated quickly. Maybe mistakes were met with anger. Maybe speaking up created embarrassment. When you're a child, in an unpredictable environment, your brain starts searching for ways to reduce danger. You don't control the situation. You can't leave. So your nervous system adapts. It becomes highly sensitive to emotional signals. You notice subtle changes in people's voices. You detect tension faster than others. And eventually, you discover something that seems to work. If I apologize first, the conflict stops sooner. If I take responsibility, maybe the anger fades. If I shrink a little, maybe everything stays calm. From the outside, that behavior might look like insecurity. But for a child, it's intelligence. It's adaptation. Your nervous system found a way to stabilize the environment. The brain remembers what keeps it safe, but the nervous system doesn't automatically update its rules. When the environment changes, you grow up, you move into new spaces, but the same protection strategy continues running in the background. Your brain still believes peace must be purchased, and the currency is apology. This is why over-apologizing psychology research often overlaps with something called people-pleasing psychology. Both patterns come from the same internal rule. Keep the peace, even if it costs you something. At first, this habit seems harmless. People describe you as kind, considerate, easy to talk to. But there's a hidden consequence that slowly appears over time, because the way you speak teaches people how to interpret your presence. Language sends signals, and when every sentence includes sorry, the signal becomes subtle but powerful. Your needs are negotiable. Your opinions are flexible. Your boundaries are soft. You thought apologizing made you easier to like, but watch what it actually does. The people around you begin adjusting their expectations. They interrupt you more easily. They ask less often for your opinion. They assume you'll agree, not because they dislike you, because your language quietly trained them to see you as agreeable, flexible, not optional. This is the part that hurts to realize. You were trying to make yourself safer by shrinking, but shrinking slowly made you invisible. And when apologies become constant, they lose meaning. A real apology is powerful. It acknowledges harm. It repairs trust. But when everything is sorry, nothing is sorry. The word becomes background noise, and the person saying it begins to feel smaller every time. This is where the shift begins. Not by forcing yourself to stop apologizing completely. That rarely works. Habits tied to the nervous system change through experience, through small moments that show the brain something new. One of the simplest changes begins with a replacement. Instead of removing the word sorry, you replace it. Imagine arriving late to meet someone. Your instinct might say, "Sorry I'm late, but there's another option. Thank you for waiting." The situation is exactly the same, but the emotional message is completely different. One sentence centers guilt. The other centers appreciation, and that small change transforms the power dynamic of the interaction. It communicates respect without shrinking. The next shift is something psychologists sometimes call the 3-second pause. Before an apology leaves your mouth, pause briefly. Ask yourself one question. Did I actually cause harm here? If the answer is yes, apologize sincerely. Take responsibility. Repair the moment. But if the answer is no, let the silence exist. Your nervous system might feel uncomfortable at first. It might expect tension, but something surprising often happens. The conversation continues normally. Nothing collapses. The imagined conflict never appears. And slowly your brain begins learning a new rule. Discomfort is not danger. Disagreement is not rejection. You are allowed to exist without constantly negotiating your presence. As this pattern shifts, another change happens. You begin noticing the habit everywhere. A coworker apologizes for asking a question. A friend apologizes for expressing a need. Someone apologizes before sharing an opinion. You realize how many people are quietly shrinking themselves in conversations, not because they are weak, because they learned the same rule. Peace requires self-erasure, but peace built on self-erasure is fragile. Real connection doesn't require constant apology. It requires honesty, presence, boundaries, and the willingness to allow tension to exist without immediately erasing it. This realization can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if your nervous system is used to smoothing every interaction. But over time, something surprising happens. Your empathy becomes clearer, because empathy is not the same as responsibility. You can care about how someone feels without taking ownership of every emotion they experience. You can listen. You can understand. You can respond thoughtfully without automatically assuming you caused the problem. This is where confidence begins to appear. Not loud confidence, not aggressive confidence, just the quiet steadiness of someone who no longer needs to apologize for existing. Your sentences become clearer. Your voice becomes calmer. Your presence becomes grounded, and people respond differently because authenticity is recognizable. It's the absence of constant self-correction. It's the feeling that someone is comfortable occupying their space. The irony is that relationships often improve when this shift happens, because when apologies become intentional again, they carry real meaning. When your voice becomes clear, people understand you better. When you stop shrinking, others feel safer expressing themselves honestly too. Communication becomes real instead of cautious, and slowly the nervous system learns something it may have never known before. Peace does not require you to disappear. You are allowed to exist in the room without constant explanation, without constant apology. You were never too much. You were simply taught that being yourself required permission. And every time you pause, instead of apologizing automatically, your brain learns something new. That safety does not come from shrinking. It comes from standing in your space without fear. So the next time someone bumps into you, you might feel the old reflex starting to appear, the word forming quietly on your tongue. Sorry. But this time, you pause, you breathe, and you let the moment pass without carrying a weight that was never yours to hold.